Hey guys, this week on the Betterhumanology podcast, we have Nate Miyaki, fitness and nutrition author, going to blow your mind on some nutritional topics.
Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, real quick, if you like the Betterhumanology podcast, could you head over to iTunes right now and leave us a 5-star review? And if you love the Betterhumanology podcast, then go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and a positive comment. Really appreciate it. Helps the show out, helps us out. And if you want to support Betterhumanology, just head over to betterhumanology.com. Sign up for a free membership. We have a ton of great stuff to give to you right after you register for an account. All right, without any further ado, let's hop into this week's podcast with Nate Miyaki. All right, Nate, I am super stoked to have you on the show. Been trying to get someone who's, just expert on nutrition, and you're the guy, man. I've been looking at your stuff, and you really know what's going on, so glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here.
And can you just start by letting my audience know exactly, who you are and kind of what your background is?
Sure. So I started out, on the formal side of things, I started out kind of along the pre-PT, pre-med track in college, so a lot of, anatomy, physiology type stuff. And during that time, I also started a training business. And after a couple internships, I just decided I would rather go with the, working on the, person from a holistic perspective rather than focusing on a knee injury or something like that. So ended up going back to school, doing some stuff in, kinesiology. And then as I got my training business going, just realized that my results with most people were coming to me for physique-oriented stuff because I was also on the practical side of things competing in natural bodybuilding and stuff like that, doing some physique modeling stuff. So, I just realized that even with the best, training programs on the planet, which I thought I could, create based on my background, my results with clients were mediocre at best until I started focusing on their nutrition plans. So then basically all of my continuing education research for the last 10 years has been, in nutrition, studying it from different camps, from traditional sports nutrition to paleo type diets to just reading research journals and following people who, do these kind of research journal analyses and stuff like that. So that's kind of the background from a formal perspective. And then on like I said, on the practical side of things, I compete in natural bodybuilding from time to time and, do some fitness modeling type stuff here and there, just as kind of a side hobby actually. And so, I kind of feel like I approach it from both perspectives in terms of, a formal background and then, practical experience in the real world. And then, so I've also been training people for, the last 15 years or so and applying some of these things as well. So, yeah, that's kind of it.
Awesome, man. And that's perfect because that's exactly your expertise is definitely what I want to talk to you about today.
Sure.
And getting focused on nutrition, you can't, I think the phrase is you can't outrun your fork or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally, man.
So I'll start by asking you about what a diet should look like or how it should differ from maybe like an athlete to someone who could be sedentary or sick. How do their macro needs change?
Yeah, totally. And that's where I think the biggest problem in our industry is we try to slot everyone into one sort of universal diet, and it just doesn't work that way. We understand, the principle of specificity when it comes to training programs, right? If you're training to compete in a powerlifting event, your training protocol is much different than an endurance athlete, is different than a bodybuilder. It makes sense from a scientific perspective in the training realm, but it just doesn't seem to get applied in the nutrition realm, which of course it makes equal sense there. So, yeah, in terms of that. Dietary numbers, it just depends on what we're talking about, and that's one of the things I started gaining traction for is that, the popularity of low carb diets is, they're great for very specific demographics. If you're insulin resistant, if, you're overweight and sedentary and you just don't burn through a bunch of carbs all day, lower carb diets work wonders for that demographic. And I think that's where, the paleo diet, for example, or the most understood versions of the paleo diet have worked wonders for people. And I fully support those diets. The difference for someone who's doing high-level anaerobic training, 5, 6, 7 times a week, they're virtually in a completely different metabolic, physiological, and hormonal state for the entire week. So their nutrition needs, their macro needs are completely different. Just offhand, I would say, much more carbohydrates depending on the type and volume and frequency of training. So, yeah, macro needs are completely different. I generally lean towards lower carb diets for sedentary and insulin resistant demographics, obese demographics, and then I lean more towards carb-based diets for athletes and regular exercisers and people like that. So yeah, much different needs, much different macro distributions as a result.
Okay, and so what kind of let's focus more on the regular exerciser or athlete.
Sure.
What kind of carbohydrates would you be recommending that they take in?
Yeah, so I generally have a hierarchy of importance when it comes to diet, and it's basically, at the top is, diet numbers like we're talking about now, calories and macros. Then it's optimizing food choices, and then it's diet structure. So food choices come in there in second. I do borrow a lot from the sort of paleo diets, and that, the overconsumption of, say, highly processed and refined sugars and just refined foods in general, fast foods, not great. There are some, GI issues when it comes to things like, gluten, highly individual, so you need to test and assess. But generally, I work, my framework has been called paleo plus starches, safe starches or whatever. I like to look at it in terms of another blogger I've read a lot is an obesity researcher, and he talks about it in terms of non-industrialized cultures. So, not necessarily going back to cavemen, but for before, like, highly refined food processing entered a lot of cultures. And so what I recommend is generally starch-based diets that are more natural, starchy carbohydrates that are more natural based. So, whole fruit, root vegetables, so potatoes, sweet potatoes, so more natural carbs, even white rice, I recommend, and then minimizing or reducing the consumption of more, refined sugars and flours, processed flours, and then some of the grain-based carbs that can be problematic based on the individual.
Okay, and I like to hear you say that because, I did a strict paleo for a long time, and my wife is actually paleo right now, but I just found, for me personally, I could not, everyone was like, oh, it'll get better, and maybe it did a little bit, but I found that I was just much better working out. I was working out 5 days a week, two times a day sometimes, and I just couldn't do strict paleo. Like, it just wasn't working for me. So I like to hear you say that, it's okay to throw that stuff in there.
Totally. And I went through the same thing, and that's how I started getting back. I returned to my sort of exercise physiology roots and said, okay, hey, looking at evolution is great from a food choice perspective, and just to me, the value of the paleo diet is more what it removes from the diet than the actual, dogma of it or universal macronutrient prescription. Because, yeah, like I said, low carbs works great, but what I was finding was the same thing, is that doing anaerobic high volume bodybuilding style training is like, there's a lot of research in carbs in relation to that, and how, going too low in carbs can lead to muscle loss, or lowered anaerobic performance can lead to low testosterone, low thyroid production, compromised met rate, all these types of things that, I had to look at it not through just the lens of evolution, but also exercise physiology. And again, getting back to that principle of specificity and saying, okay, well, let's assess what our training program is. That type of training is not what cavemen were doing. Cavemen were doing as little activity as possible. Right, walking around, and then maybe short bursts of anaerobic activity, sprinting and clubbing stuff to death. But they weren't doing the type of, high volume, training involved in, people doing physique sports or performance-based sports. And so you see that a lot. I see that in MMA right now as, it got popular, people getting popped for testosterone because they're just not recovering from their workouts. So they have to do drugs to, recover from their workouts. You saw it in the NBA this year when, a couple of guys went on, paleo type diets and their performance just dropped dramatically, right? So it's all about, again, getting back to that specificity principle and saying, hey, there's some good things about paleo, but don't get wrapped up in the dogma. Take what's good, some of the food choices, some of the elimination of, highly refined processed foods, but then, learn to adjust the diet based on your training program and look at sports nutrition research. I mean, there's so much research we have in sports nutrition that you can take fundamental principles from both and kind of combine them to get the best of both worlds.
And so just kind of talking, I was talking kind of like a performance background, but what do you see as the difference between like physique goals versus performance goals? Or like what food should look like in those two different realms, I guess, or
well, I generally start, again, numbers are the most important, so that's where I always look at in terms of performance and physique goals. Your numbers are the most important, but I think food choices, make a difference in terms of just the overall health benefits of the diet, GI health, all that, and so. When you look at the difference between performance and physique, it's really a numbers thing. So I start with the framework of, hey, eating predominantly whole foods, natural foods, that just that assumption of anyone who has kind of health and fitness goals. But then looking at the numbers, so obviously, the main goal for a performance athlete is to perform at their best, right? So whether it's strength, whether it's power output, all those types of things, they want to be at the highest level of performance. And when you look at sports and nutrition research, they're factoring that in. So they want, full muscle glycogen stores, full liver glycogen stores, all that stuff. So the carb recommendations in sports nutrition research tend to be a lot, higher, right? It's like 5 to 7 grams per kilogram of body weight, for strength athletes, and it's up to 10 grams for, high volume, endurance athletes. So I mean, that's a lot of freaking carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So, you divide your body weight in pounds by 2.2, and then you multiply by 5 to 10. I mean, you're talking someone like me who's 165. You're talking about, anywhere from 350 to 700 grams of carbohydrates a day.
Wow.
You could perform very well at that level, but I would argue that you would have a hard time getting lean, physique style lean, bodybuilding style lean, eating that many carbohydrates. So for someone who's doing more physique, they want to perform well and they want to be strong, but maximizing leanness and low body fat and maintaining muscle mass, generally the calories and the carbs are going to be lower than a performance athlete's, because to get that lean, you're not going to be, when you're 4% body fat and doing a fitness shoot, you're not your strongest. You're not going to go out there and crush it. So generally, I recommend much lower carbs, but not no carbs. So, it might be something closer to, like, I think I put in my carbs book, it was like you see a lot in cutting phases, it's like 1 to 1.5 grams of carbs per pound of body weight. And then, in growth phases, it might be, 2 to 3, but it still doesn't get as high as like 10 grams per kilogram, something like that. So I think in general, you're going to be at a lower carb and calorie level for physique and a little bit higher if optimizing performance is your goal. And then, of course, that's different spectrums, right? And there's always, a ton of places in the middle ground between that,
Yeah, and I think when I first started, fitness is a journey, like we're all going, from step by step. I started definitely in the physique world, and I got pretty good at being able to manage my body weight, or if I needed to gain, because what would happen, like in college, if I had a summer break or whatever, I would say I want to gain this much weight, and this, because I knew I had this much time and put on this much muscle and all that stuff. I got pretty good at it, but my diet was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like the worst, but like how I was gaining that then compared to now is completely different. But also, eating had to become my job. So like just eating all these meals constantly, and I guess kind of popular culture has like the 6 small meals a day or whatever for, whether you're trying, I guess if you're gaining, you just eat a lot more. You could do 6 large meals. But so what have you found as far as, I don't know if I should call it diet timing or traditional diets.
Sure.
What you found in your research.
Yeah, and a lot about it is, so again, if we go back to that's why, just based on my research and all the studies I've seen and kind of just, again, practical application and kind of the newer researchers that coming out, that a lot of the things we used to think we had to do were somewhat kind of gym myths, and that's why I go back to my hierarchy. I say, for physique and performance, diet numbers are the most important. Food choices, I think, are important for optimizing overall health. And also, again, if you're in a calorie deficit, you want to be eating natural whole foods because of their impacts on, nutrient density and satiety. So it'll be very hard to be in the calorie deficit necessary for fat loss if the majority of your foods are refined processed foods. You just be hungry all the time and you won't be able to stick to it. But, in the hierarchy, diet numbers and food choices are by far the most important for physique and health. Diet structure, so meal frequency and food distribution, at least from the research I've seen, is a distant third, and it's really, if you control for 1 and 2, there's you have the freedom to kind of break up your diet any way you see fit. So if that's the case, a lot of the studies, like I said, you control for calories and macros, body composition effects and changes, thermic effect of food, all these things are relatively a wash. They're the equal regardless of whether you eat 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, or 6 meals a day. So if that's the case, then diet structure is really about whatever makes you sticking to 1 and 2 as practical, functional, and sustainable as possible. And I, too, used to follow kind of 6 small meals a day. And, I just thought I had to. And, as an athlete, I would do it and sacrifice enough. But what I found is like now I eat 3 meals a day, and I get just as good, if not better, body composition results because it's much more practical and sustainable to do that in normal life. And especially if you're working with busy professionals and entrepreneurs and people who have these careers outside of fitness, I found in my own practice that by giving people that meal frequency and food distribution freedom, adherence rates are up, and thus results are up. So what I found is that it's highly individual. So once you break down the diet numbers and give people good food templates to follow, give them the flexibility of breaking that up however they see fit. The one caveat I'll say is the one I write about a lot is I think that doing the reverse of what most of you hear in the fitness industry is saving a good percentage of calories and carbs for your dinner meal and eating a satiating meal at night is one thing that has made dieting a lot easier for most of the people I've worked with. So pretty much get the calories and the food choices right, then have, break it up however you see fit. But I will say if you're struggling, sustaining a diet or adhering to a diet, I would recommend trying eating a larger percentage of calories and carbs at night, and it just makes it so much more enjoyable and easy to adhere to.
And something you pointed out just now, you mentioned template, so that just kind of drove my curiosity. If you're helping someone, and it could be whether it's performance or maybe they need to lose some weight, do you give someone a diet plan, or do you give them more like principle template, like here are the rules, kind of follow this? What's your approach?
Yeah, I used to just be like, hey, do this, right? Yeah. And it works for a small percentage, but I try to be a lot more flexible in my plans these days, and I do work more with templates than specific meal plans because everyone's life is different. Everyone's, schedule is different. Everyone's food choices that they prefer are different. So I try to, on the other hand, you don't want to have someone thinking they could just do a free-for-all and do whatever they want. And you know that doesn't work either. But yeah, I try to work more with templates. So, for example, I do use the paleo diet. For some people, I'm just like, listen, if you're sedentary and you're not going to work out and you're just, an office worker, like if I go and talking to corporate wellness program, I might say, hey, paleo diet's a great template. It's pretty simple to remember, right? It's just animal proteins, whole fruits, vegetables, you might have a sweet potato for dinner or something like that, but it's just not a lot of processed refined foods. It's a relatively lower carb diet. I tend to work with that template. And then for athletes, I use what I call an island style diet template, which is kind of a compilation of all these like non-industrialized cultures, which is a little bit more flexible in terms of food choices, adding back in those starches to support anaerobic training. So like we talked about the root vegetables and the rice and stuff like that. And then I say, listen, you want to follow that 80-90% of the time, but have some freedom to work in some foods that you like. That's where sometimes I'll have people track their food, because it's like, listen, if 10% of your calories are coming from whatever you want, just make sure 80 to 90% is coming from these whole foods. So yeah, I tend to work more on a template. I think that works better for long-term sustainable plans. But again, it's highly individual. Sometimes someone will come to me and is like, dude, I got a photo shoot in 10 weeks. Give me something to eat. I'll eat it. I don't care, because I just want to be in shape. Then it's maybe a little bit more, specific meal plans. But for the most part, for most people, I prefer templates much more than specific meal plans.
Yeah, and I really like your approach, not only in the template thing, but it just seems like, I don't know, you don't hate on any particular view of nutrition. You just feel like every different group has what they need. Like I believe you called it diet specificity.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think because some people get in there like you meet a hardcore paleo person.
Totally, man.
And then they're just like, there's nothing. It's paleo or nothing. It's paleo or die. And those totally. That can just be kind of frustrating at times.
Yeah, and I think the dogma really turns people away from good information, because there's a lot of valuable information in the paleo diet approach. And I got like Rob Wolf is the paleo diet guy, and he's so. He's got such great content, and he's totally non-dogmatic. I mean, he himself posted some, post a while back about how he was eating like 300 grams of carbs a day because of the training he was doing, and like it was like crazy. Paleo world went crazy when he did that, but he's just like, listen, hey, here's the real deal. There's some great things about paleo, but you got to adjust it based on, again, your sport and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in a variety of these approaches. You just have to understand how to apply it based on the individual person, or if you're writing content based on the different demographics of people. I think sports nutrition is great too. The numbers are great. I mean, there's a ton of research on it, but at the same time, I think downing a bunch of refined sugar drinks and sports drinks, I don't think is necessary. I think you can eat higher quality carbs like, sweet potatoes and whole fruit and stuff like that, and get equally good results, but, have a healthier diet overall. So I think you can pull things from these different camps, and I've pulled from all of them, and then individualize a plan based on the person.
And I think that, whether it comes to training, coaching, nutrition advice, everything at some point is going to have to get personalized. Most of the time there's general principles, but there's not a general plan you can give to everyone.
Totally. All
right, man. So I really appreciate, talking about nutrition. Been a lot of fun, but now we have to move on to the quickfire questions of the show. So cool. I'll give you a quick question, a quick answer. You can elaborate if you want to, but you don't have to. Are you ready?
Yeah, quick answers for me sometimes are hard to come by. I'm a rambler.
Hey, and that's perfectly fine. I don't want you to feel limited in any way.
Totally, man. Let's do it. I'm excited about it.
All right, man. Hardest workout you've ever done?
Hardest workout? Oh, yeah, this is surprising, but I used to train as a professional wrestler. I toured around for 2 years. I got into that through capoeira and gymnastics, acrobatics, but the boot camp they had to start before you started, doing the actual stunts and stuff was by far the hardest. It was like a 2-month protocol, and it was just hell, man. And I've done, I was a sprinter, football player, and I've trained in bodybuilding, and nothing was as hard as that. We had actually a couple guys who had done Army boot camps, and they're like, man, this rivals that. This is just brutal. So training for pro wrestling, the boot camp before the actual learning of the stunts.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. All right, man. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Best activity for building mental toughness? Probably hill sprints, man. Depending on the distance. I mean, I am a bodybuilder. I love bodybuilding, and that's kind of my thing. But I come from a performance background, and nothing will test you more than sprinting up a straight uphill for a long distance.
And I agree. I almost lost my lunch not too long ago doing that. All right, man. If you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Dumbbells, just because you can do any human movement pattern with resistance, and Yeah, I just think you could train the entire body. Again, I'm more of a physique oriented person now, so I'm like, I can do every movement possible, target every muscle, whether a compound movement or an isolation with a dumbbell.
Perfect. All right, man, this is the most important question of the show. Everyone gets it because we are the Better Humanology podcast. So what is your best advice you have for becoming a better human? 100% open-ended.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about the Kaizen principle. So just kind of improving a little bit every day. Just the process of improving a little bit every day, no matter what you do. So you pick a couple things you want to prioritize and focus on, and you just get a little bit better at those every day. And ask yourself at the end of the day, hey, am I better at X than I was when I woke up this morning? And I think it's a great way to tackle any challenge, big or small. And I think it just ensures progress. It automates progress. You know what I mean? And whatever you are passionate about or care about. So Kaizen principle, I've talked a lot about it in my different articles, but it's something I try to apply every day. But you can't do it to everything, all the time. But if you could prioritize and then pick a couple things you're trying to improve, and then just one foot in front of the other every day, man.
I like it. All right, man. Thanks. That concludes the questions, the quickfire questions. So,
Cool.
But I do want to give you an opportunity because I know you have a lot of great stuff, content, books, and everything. So,
Sure.
Where can my listeners, go find out more about you and check out what you're doing?
Sure. Everything I do is housed on my website. So it's, I kind of write for different magazines and, and got books in different spots and stuff. But you can find everything at natemiyaki.com. That's NATEMIYAKI.com. And then probably the most relevant thing based on what we talked about today was the, the Amazon book I just released in November. It's called The Truth About Carbs. So, if you Google The Truth About Carbs on Amazon, it'll be the first thing that pops up, and it's really what kind of the book format of what we talked about today of diet specificity, carb-based diets for certain demographics, low carb diets for others, how to apply that. We even some of the nutrition numbers we talked about in terms of the difference between performance sports and physique. It's all in there, so it was kind of just my manifesto about carbohydrates and. So my website, and then if based on what we talked about today, you guys might find that Truth About Carbs book pretty interesting.
Okay, awesome. And I'll be sure to link to your website in the show notes where everyone can go check it out. Other than that, man, that's all I have. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I hope it helps out, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Better Humanology podcast. If you want to know about any of the resources we talked about, head on over to betterhumanology.com and check out the podcast show notes. Likewise, we have betterhumanology.com/toolbox where you can find every resource that we've ever talked about on the podcast. So go check it out. Until next time, here's to becoming a better human.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.